The Tonight Show host, Johnny Carson, was in the middle of his speech when the phone rang live on TV. His 78-year-old mother called from Nebraska. She had something to say that would cut his heart and the hearts of everyone in America. The 15th of December 1982 was a Tuesday. It was business as usual on The Tonight Show, with Johnny Carson's opening monologue about President Reagan's economic measures and the coming holiday season. The 300 people in the room were laughing at the right times, and 25 million people across America were getting ready for another night of fun with their favorite late-night host. Johnny was in the middle of a joke about shopping for Christmas when something out of the ordinary happened. The red phone on his desk. The toy had been on the Tonight Show set for more than 10 years, but it had never rung during a live show. Suddenly, it did, and the shrill, insistent sound cut through Johnny's perfectly timed joke. The crowd went quiet. Ed McMahon seemed lost. The band stopped playing with Doc Severinsen singing. For a moment, Johnny just stood there and stared at the phone like he couldn't believe what was going on. The red phone was meant to be turned off. As part of the joke about the presidential number that Johnny sometimes used in his speeches, it was just a prop. But it was ringing during a live show, which was being watched by large groups of people. Johnny looked at the show's director, Fred Decordova, who was making a lot of hand signals behind the cameras. Fred was also not sure what was going on. It wasn't planned, it wasn't written down, and it sure wasn't supposed to happen on a live TV show. The phone kept going off. Finally, Johnny did something that would lead to one of the most memorable TV scenes ever. He reached over and took the phone. "Hello," Johnny said, keeping his famous cool despite the strange scenario. "This is The Tonight Show," Johnny, a familiar voice, said over the phone. Everyone in the studio and everyone watching at home could hear it. "Hello, Johnny, is that really you?" Johnny's face showed a lot of different feelings. There was confusion, then realization, and then total shock. On the other end of the line was his mother, Dorothy Carson, who is 78 years old and called from her home in Norfolk, Nebraska. "Mom." Johnny's voice was a little rough. "Mom, how did you do? Why do you want to call the show? How did you even get this phone to work?" The warm and familiar sound of Dorothy Carson's laugh came through the speakers. "John, I called NBC and told them it was an emergency. They put me on a phone line that they said would connect me straight to you. I had no idea it would be live on TV until I could hear the crowd. When the studio audience realized they were seeing something totally real and unscripted, they started to scream with joy. This wasn't a planned joke or a guest visit by a famous person. This was Johnny Carson's real mother calling him while he was on the show. Johnny said, 'Mom,' and then he ran his hand through his hair in a way that millions of people had never seen before. Johnny Carson really does look upset. You can't just call NBC and ask to be connected to The Tonight Show. It doesn't work that way." "Oh, honey," Dorothy said, and her voice had the loving annoyance that only a mother can have. Don't stress about how it works. They asked who I was, and I said I was your mom. I told them I had to tell you something right away because it was important." Johnny looked at the crowd and then at the cameras, clearly trying to figure out what to do in this completely new situation. He could have hung up, said it was a technical problem, or switched to commercial. He chose instead to do something that showed the American people something about him they had never seen before. "Okay, Mom," Johnny said as he leaned back in his chair and smiled in a way that was different from how he usually smiles to perform. This one was honest, free of guard, and full of real love. "What did you want to say now that 25 million people are heard? Tell me." After that, there was a talk that no one in the studio or at home would ever forget. Dorothy Carson started talking to her son in a way that only a parent can, directly and honestly. It didn't bother her at all that she was doing this in front of a national TV audience. "Johnny, I wanted you to know that your dad and I really enjoyed the show last week where you talked about growing up in Nebraska. You should know how proud we are of you." The studio audience thought this was the setup for a joke or a scripted segment, but they soon understood it was something much more real and important. Johnny said, "Mom, you say that all the time." There was something in his voice, though, that made me think this wasn't like the calls they usually make. Dorothy said, "I know I do, sweetheart. However, I chose to tell you on TV so that everyone could see what a great kid you are. I don't mean Johnny Carson the performer, but Johnny Carson the guy. Johnny's famous calmness started to come apart a little. "Mom, I don't think people in America need to know about my private life." "Well, I think they do," Dorothy said in a firm voice that all moms would know. "People are always laughing at you, but you never tell them about the good things you do when the cameras are off." Everyone, even Johnny, was shocked by what Dorothy Carson said next. She started to talk about things Johnny had not told anyone for years. His anonymous gifts to children's hospitals, his quiet support of comedians who were having a hard time, and his trips to veterans facilities that he asked the press not to report. Dorothy went on to say last month, "You flew out to Nebraska just to surprise Mrs. Henderson next door after her husband died. She talked about her Harold while you sat in her kitchen and drank coffee for 2 hours. She had no idea you were famous. She only knew you as the nice boy who grew up next door." Johnny's face got red, and he looked really awkward. "Mom, that's not important for other people to know." And when Tommy Patterson, a little boy down the street, got sick, Dorothy kept going even though Johnny was upset. "You paid for his medical care, but you told his family that the money came from a stranger. Toy's mom called me crying and wanted to thank whoever had helped them. I didn't want to tell her it was you, but I had to hold back." The people in the room were now completely silent and listening carefully to every word. It was no longer fun to do this. It was a look into the private life of a man who had spent decades making them laugh while hiding his kindness from the public eye. "Mom," Johnny said in a low voice, "what's the point of telling people this?" Dorothy's voice got softer. When she spoke again, everyone could tell from her tone that this wasn't just a mother bragging about her kid. "Because, Johnny, I'm 78 years old and saw the doctor last week. He told me some things I should think about." The words seemed to be there, hanging in the air. Johnny's face turned pale, and he looked like he couldn't say a word on live TV for the first time in his career. "What kinds of things, Mom?" he asked in a voice that was almost whispery. "The kind of things that make a mother want to make sure her son knows how proud she is of him before it's too late to say it properly," Dorothy said. "And things that make her want everyone to know not only how funny her son is, but also what a good man he is." Johnny Carson had been very professional when dealing with drunk guests, technology problems, and every other kind of live TV emergency until he finally lost it. As he held the phone, tears started to fall from his eyes, and when he tried to talk, his voice broke. "Would you like to tell me, Mom, that you're sick?" Dorothy told him. "I'm trying to tell you that I love you, and that every night when I watch your show, I see more than just the famous comedian Johnny Carson. I see the little boy who used to make puppet shows for me in the living room when I was having a bad day." People in the room were crying. This is when Ed McMahon wiped his eyes. Camera workers had a hard time keeping their gear steady. Everywhere in the United States, 25 million people were watching one of the most real TV moments ever. "Mom, I love you too," Johnny was able to say through tears. "I'll see you this weekend, okay? We'll have coffee in the kitchen and talk about everything." Dorothy answered, "That sounds great, honey. But I think you need to finish a show right now. They came to see how funny you are, not how sad you look about your mom." Johnny Carson was able to get himself together enough to keep the show going. He wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, and then spoke straight to the crowd. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen," with a somber tone in his voice, "I want to apologize for that interruption, but as you just heard, my mother had something important to tell me, and, apparently, she decided that 25 million people needed to hear it too." The crowd gave a huge cheer. Instead of the usual enthusiastic reaction to a comedy act, it was the kind of respectful emotional applause people give when they've seen something truly moving. Johnny added, "I also want to say that if any of you have mothers who are still alive, call them tomorrow. Tell them you love them right away. Not when they call you live on TV." Folks told stories about what happened. Calls to NBC from fans wanting to show their support for Johnny and hope that his mother would be okay started coming in right away. Letters came in from all over the world telling their own stories about their parents. The most important call Johnny got, though, was from his mom the next morning. When Johnny Dorothy called her, he said, "I hope last night didn't make you mad." "I was sorry for making you look bad on TV," Johnny told Emmy.